The dust-laden wind carried the bitter scent of sage as Josephine Fairchild stood at the edge of her family's struggling ranch, her trembling fingers clutching the letter that had sealed her fate. At 18 years old, with hair the color of autumn wheat and eyes that reflected the vast Montana sky, she had just been informed that by week's end, she would become the bride of Ebenezer Stockton, a weathered cattle baron of 47 whose wife had passed the previous winter. It was 1876, and the drought had ravaged the Fairchild Ranch for 2 consecutive seasons. Her father's desperate gambles to save their livelihood had left them in insurmountable debt to Stockton, who had proposed a simple solution: Josephine's hand in marriage in exchange for forgiveness of what they owed. "It is decided," her father had told her that morning, his voice hollow with shame but firm with resolve. "The papers are signed. You'll be Mrs. Stockton come Sunday." Josephine watched the distant horizon where the mountains met the sky, wondering if her dreams would die in the grand but loveless house Stockton had built on the other side of Willow Creek. She'd heard tales of his stern demeanor, his exacting standards, and his 3 children, the youngest just 7 years her junior. "Miss Fairchild," the deep voice startled her from her reverie. Turning, she found herself looking up at a man she recognized from town, Nicholas Irving, who'd arrived in the territory earlier that spring. He sat atop a chestnut gelding, his broad-brimmed hat casting shadows across features tanned by sun and wind. Unlike many of the rough-hewn men who frequented the saloons of nearby Helena, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that had caught her attention on the few occasions their paths had crossed. "Mr. Irving," she acknowledged, hastily wiping away a tear that had escaped despite her determination to face her circumstances with courage. "I apologize for intruding," he said, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man at home in the saddle. "I was hoping to speak with your father about purchasing some timber from your North Ridge." Josephine tucked the letter into her pocket. "He's in the barn, trying to mend the broken wagon axle, though I'm not sure we have timber to sell anymore." Nicholas studied her face, noting the redness around her eyes. "Are you all right, Miss Fairchild?" There was something in his tone, genuine concern rather than idle curiosity, that broke through the dam of composure she'd been struggling to maintain. "No," she admitted, the word barely audible above the prairie wind. "No, I am not." Nicholas removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair that curled slightly at the ends. "Is there anything I might do to help?" A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Unless you can produce $3,000 to save our ranch, Mr. Irving, I'm afraid not." His expression remained steady. "That's a considerable sum. Your family's situation must be dire. Dire enough that my father has found another solution." She turned away, gazing toward Stockton's property in the distance. "I'm to marry Ebenezer Stockton on Sunday." Nicholas's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Stockton? He's twice my age and widowed less than a year." "Yes." She hadn't meant to be so forthright with a man she barely knew, but somehow the words tumbled out. "But he'll cancel our debt, and my parents and younger brothers won't lose everything." He was silent for a long moment, and when Josephine glanced back, she found his blue eyes studying her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "You deserve kindness, Miss Fairchild," he finally said, his voice low but firm, "not to be bargained away like cattle." Something in his words, or perhaps the way he said them, made her throat constrict with emotion. No one, not even her mother, had suggested that what was happening to her might be wrong. "Kindness doesn't feed families, Mr. Irving," she replied, though without conviction. "Perhaps not directly." He replaced his hat. "But I'd wager there are solutions that don't require sacrificing your future happiness." Before Josephine could respond, her father's voice called from the direction of the barn. Nicholas nodded respectfully. "I should speak with Mr. Fairchild about that timber," he said. "But our conversation isn't finished, Miss Fairchild, if you'll permit me." As he led his horse toward the barn, Josephine watched him go, a strange sensation fluttering in her chest, something dangerously close to hope. The meeting between Nicholas and her father lasted longer than expected. From the kitchen window, Josephine observed them walking the property line, engaged in what appeared to be serious discussion. Her mother worked silently beside her, rolling out dough for the evening's biscuits with mechanical precision. "He seems a decent sort," her mother commented, following Josephine's gaze. "Mr. Irving, I suppose he is." Josephine sliced potatoes with more force than necessary. "Don't blame your father too harshly, Josie." Her mother's voice was soft but strained. "He's doing what he thinks best for all of us. By selling me to a man old enough to be my father, by ensuring we don't all starve come winter." Her mother wiped flour-covered hands on her apron. "Mr. Stockton is respected, he'll provide well for you, and that's all that matters." "That I'm fed and sheltered like one of his prized horses," her mother's hand stilled. "Of course not. But in this world, women must be practical." Before Josephine could argue further, the kitchen door opened and her father entered with Nicholas following behind. "Mr. Irving has made an interesting proposal," her father announced, his expression unreadable. Her mother frowned slightly. "About the timber and more." Her father glanced at Nicholas, who stepped forward. "Mrs. Fairchild, Miss Fairchild," he began, removing his hat. "I've offered your husband a partnership. My cattle operation is expanding, but I lack sufficient grazing land. The Fairchild property would be ideal, particularly the western section near the creek." Josephine's heart sank. Another businessman looking to profit from their misfortune. "And what would we receive in this partnership?" her mother asked. 30% of the profit from the combined herd, use of my hands during roundup and branding," and he paused, meeting Josephine's eyes directly. "Immediate payment of $3,000 to clear your debt with Stockton." The potato knife clattered to the floor as Josephine stared at him in disbelief. "Why would you do this?" her father asked, the question Josephine couldn't voice herself. "You've only been in these parts a short while. Taking on a partner deep in debt seems foolhardy." Nicholas's gaze remained steady. "I've made careful observations since arriving in Montana territory. Your land has the best water access for miles, and despite recent hardships, your breeding stock is quality. It's a sound business decision." But the look he gave Josephine suggested there might be more to it than business. Her father cleared his throat. "We need to formalize the agreement quickly. Stockton expects payment or, the alternative, by Sunday." "I've already drafted the necessary documents," Nicholas replied. "My lawyer and Helena can finalize them tomorrow." Later that evening, as twilight painted the mountains in shades of purple, Josephine found Nicholas alone on the porch, smoking a thin cigar and gazing at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "You didn't have to do this," she said softly, wrapping her shawl tighter around her shoulders against the evening chill. He turned, tapping ash from his cigar. "As I told your father, it's a sound investment. $3,000 is a considerable investment for a man who arrived in the territory just months ago." A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. "You're questioning my finances, Miss Fairchild? I'm questioning your motives." Nicholas studied her for a long moment before extinguishing his cigar. "When I first came to town, I saw you at church. You were helping elderly Mrs. Thompson navigate the steps. Later that week, I noticed you teaching reading to the Holloway children whose mother works at the laundry." Josephine's cheeks warmed under his scrutiny. "Simple Christian charity. Kindness," he corrected. "The same kindness you deserve in return." He leaned against the porch railing. "When I heard about your arrangement with Stockton, it didn't sit right, a woman being traded to settle a debt." "That's not a marriage, it's a transaction." "And your offer isn't," she challenged. "My offer is to your father for a business partnership. What you do with your freedom afterward is entirely your choice." The implications of his words washed over her. Freedom, choice. Concepts that had seemed impossibly distant just hours before. "Why do you care what happens to me?" she whispered. Nicholas's expression softened. "Because in the few moments we've spoken, I've seen more spirit and intelligence in you than in most people I've encountered in my 30 years. To see that spirit crushed by circumstance seemed wrong." Before Josephine could respond, the door opened, and her father stepped onto the porch. "We should discuss the details of this arrangement, Irving," he said, though his eyes lingered on his daughter with a mixture of concern and relief. Nicholas nodded. "Of course, Mr. Fairchild, Miss Fairchild, if you'll excuse us." As they disappeared inside, Josephine remained on the porch, her mind racing with possibilities she hadn't dared consider just hours before. For the first time in weeks, she took a deep breath that didn't feel like drowning. The following morning dawned clear and bright, with a crispness that hinted at the approaching autumn. Josephine rose early, dressing with care in her blue calico dress, the one her mother had sewn for her last birthday. Her father and Nicholas had departed for Helena at first light to meet with the lawyer and formalize their agreement. More importantly, they would visit Ebenezer Stockton to settle the debt and officially release Josephine from her obligation to marry him. The thought sent butterflies swarming through her stomach. Would Stockton accept the arrangement without protest? He was a proud man, used to getting his way. "You look lovely," her mother said, entering her bedroom with a basket of freshly folded laundry. "Though I'm not sure why you've put on your best dress for chores." Josephine smoothed the fabric self-consciously. "I thought I might go into town later." To thank Mr. Irving properly for his assistance. Her mother's knowing smile made Josephine blush. "His assistance, is it? The man rides in like something from a dime novel and offers $3,000 to save you from a marriage you dreaded. I'd say that deserves more than mere thanks." "Mother," Josephine protested, though she couldn't help smiling, "I'm just saying what's plain as day." Her mother set down the laundry basket. "The way he looks at you isn't purely business, regardless of what he claims. We've barely exchanged more than a few sentences." "Sometimes a few sentences are all it takes." Her mother's expression grew serious. "Your father and I married for love, but we were fortunate. Many women don't have that luxury." Josephine nodded, thinking of the loveless marriages she'd witnessed, unions formed for convenience, security, or necessity. "Do you think Mr. Stockton will accept the money?" she asked, voicing her deepest concern. Her mother's hesitation was answer enough. "Ebenezer is a businessman first. Money speaks to him, but he's also accustomed to power and control. Having his arrangement with you so publicly dissolved might wound his pride." The sound of approaching horses interrupted their conversation. Rushing to the window, Josephine saw her father and Nicholas returning, accompanied by a third rider, Ebenezer Stockton himself. Her heart plummeted. This couldn't be good. By the time Josephine and her mother reached the front yard, the men had dismounted. Her father looked grim, Nicholas's expression was carefully neutral, and Stockton's face was flushed with barely contained anger. "Martha, Josephine," her father acknowledged them tensely. "Mr. Stockton insisted on speaking with you directly." Ebenezer Stockton was a tall, lean man with iron-gray hair and cold eyes that had likely witnessed more than their fair share of hardship and violence in the building of his cattle empire. He removed his hat in a gesture of courtesy that did nothing to soften his intimidating presence. "Mrs. Fairchild," he nodded, then turned his attention fully to Josephine. "Miss Fairchild, it seems there's been a development regarding our arrangement." Josephine lifted her chin slightly. "Yes, Mr. Stockton, my father has found means to repay our debt. So I've been informed." His gaze flicked to Nicholas with undisguised contempt. "Rather convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Just days before our wedding." "The timing is irrelevant," Nicholas interjected calmly. "The debt will be paid in full as legally required. Any other arrangements between you and the Fairchilds are now moot." Stockton's jaw tightened. "I don't believe I was addressing you, Irving. You're new to these parts, perhaps you don't understand how things work here." "I understand contract law perfectly well," Nicholas replied, his voice level but with steel beneath. "And unless you had a separate written agreement regarding Miss Fairchild's hand, your claim has no legal standing." The tension between the two men was palpable. Josephine's father stepped forward. "Ebenezer, please, we've known each other 15 years. The money resolves our business matter fairly. As for Josephine, Stockton interrupted, his eyes never leaving her face. "I expected better." A woman's word should mean something, even in these changing times. The accusation stung, though Josephine knew it was unfair. "I never gave my word, Mr. Stockton. The arrangement was made without consulting me. Nonetheless, preparations have been made, announcements sent. My household readied." He adjusted his coat with deliberate movements. "People will talk. Let them, Nicholas said, stepping closer to Josephine in a gesture that wasn't lost on anyone present. Stockton's eyes narrowed as he studied the pair of them. I see, so that's how it is. He replaced his hat with a sharp movement. Very well, I'll accept your payment, Fairchild. Consider our business concluded, all of it. But remember, this territory has a long memory. Debts of all kinds eventually come due. With that ominous statement hanging in the air, he mounted his horse and departed without another word, dust billowing in his wake. When he was gone, Josephine released a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her father's shoulders slumped in visible relief. That could have gone worse, he muttered, or better, her mother added. He's not a man who forgets perceived slights. Nicholas turned to Josephine. Are you all right? The genuine concern in his voice touched something deep within her. Yes, thank you for everything. Don't thank me yet, he replied quietly. Stockton's threat wasn't empty. He has influence in this region with merchants, bankers, even the territorial judge. We should be prepared for challenges. Her father nodded grimly. Irving's right, Ebenezer isn't done making his displeasure known. Josephine looked between the three adults, a determination forming within her. Then we face whatever comes together. I won't be intimidated into a loveless marriage, not even by Ebenezer Stockton. Nicholas's smile was quick but warm. That's the spirit I admired from the start, Miss Fairchild. For the first time since her father had announced her impending marriage, Josephine felt the weight lift from her shoulders. Whatever came next, she would face it on her own terms. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to the Fairchild Ranch. Nicholas proved to be an innovative and hardworking partner, introducing new breeding techniques and more efficient ways to manage the grazing rotation. With the debt to Stockton cleared, the family could focus on rebuilding their operation rather than merely surviving. For Josephine, the greatest change was in her own sense of possibility. Free from the shadow of forced marriage, she found herself exploring interests she'd previously set aside, reading voraciously from Nicholas's substantial library, learning about cattle management, and even accompanying him on rides to check fence lines and water sources. It was during one such ride in late September, with the aspen trees beginning to turn golden against the evergreens, that Josephine first realized her feelings for Nicholas had grown far beyond gratitude or friendship. They had stopped to rest their horses by a small stream, the afternoon sun warm against the cool autumn air. Nicholas was explaining his plans for rotating the herd to the southern pastures before the first snow when he suddenly paused mid-sentence. You're not listening to a word I'm saying, are you? He asked, amusement playing at the corners of his mouth. Josephine blushed. I'm sorry, I was distracted by the changing colors. It wasn't entirely a lie, but neither was it the complete truth. The aspens are particularly beautiful this year, he agreed, dismounting to let his horse drink from the stream. Josephine did the same, removing her gloves and letting her fingers trail through the clear, cold water. I've always loved autumn. The world transforms before winter comes. Nicholas watched her, something unreadable in his expression. Transformations can happen anytime, not just with the seasons. Like your transformation from lone cattleman to business partner with my father, she teased gently, among other changes. He hesitated, then added, You've transformed as well, Josephine. Since that day, I found you reading Stockton's letter. The use of her first name, something he'd only recently begun doing, sent a pleasant warmth through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. How so? You're more confident, more willing to speak your mind, he smiled. Though you were never exactly shy about that, even facing an unwanted marriage, she laughed softly. Perhaps I just needed to remember I had choices. We all have choices, he agreed, stepping closer. Some more difficult than others. There was something in his tone that made her heart beat faster. They had been careful with each other these past weeks, maintaining a respectful distance despite the growing closeness of their companionship. Josephine had told herself it was proper that Nicholas had saved her from one arrangement and wouldn't want her feeling obligated to him in another way, but the look in his eyes now suggested something entirely different. Nicholas, she began, uncertain what she even wanted to say. I've been thinking, he interrupted gently, about what happens next, with the ranch, with us. His directness took her breath away. I came to Montana looking for a fresh start, planning to build my operation alone. I didn't expect to find someone who would change everything I thought I wanted. Josephine's pulse thundered in her ears. What do you want now? He took another step closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. I want to court you properly, Josephine Fairchild. Not because of any arrangement or obligation, but because in these weeks of knowing you, I've come to admire everything about you, your courage, your intelligence, your kindness. Joy bubbled up inside her, threatening to overflow. I'd like that very much. His smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face. For a moment, it seemed he might kiss her, but instead, he took her hand and pressed his lips gently to her knuckles in a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. We should head back, he said, though he didn't release her hand immediately. Your parents will wonder where we've disappeared to. The ride home was filled with a new awareness between them, unspoken but undeniable. As they approached the ranch, however, Josephine noticed an unfamiliar wagon in the yard and several men standing with her father. That's Judge Wilson's buggy, Nicholas said, his voice suddenly tense. And the man with him is Harvey Miller, Stockton's lawyer. Josephine felt cold dread replace the warmth of moments before. What could they want? Nothing good. Nicholas's expression hardened. Stay close to me. As they rode into the yard, the conversation between the men abruptly ceased. Judge Wilson, a portly man with mutton chop whiskers, nodded in greeting. Mr. Irving, Miss Fairchild, good timing. We were just discussing a matter that concerns you both. Her father's face was pale with suppressed anger. They've brought papers, Josie, legal documents. Miller, a thin man with spectacles and a permanently pinched expression, held out a sheaf of papers. Simply a formal inquiry into the sudden dissolution of arrangements between the Fairchild family and Mr. Stockton, and the coincidental appearance of Mr. Irving with exactly the sum needed. Nicholas dismounted in one fluid motion. What exactly are you implying, Miller? The lawyer's smile was cold. Nothing illegal, necessarily, but the territorial statutes have clear provisions against contractual interference. If Mr. Irving deliberately undermined a prior agreement, there was no binding agreement regarding my daughter's marriage, Josephine's father interrupted furiously. Only a debt which was paid in full. Judge Wilson cleared his throat uncomfortably. That's what we're here to determine, Thomas. Mr. Stockton claims verbal assurances were given. Nicholas's jaw tightened, and his word alone is sufficient for legal action. His word carries considerable weight in this territory, Miller replied smoothly. As does his friendship with Governor Potts. Josephine, who had dismounted and moved to stand beside Nicholas, felt a surge of indignation. This is absurd. Am I to have no say in my own future? The judge had the grace to look embarrassed. Miss Fairchild, no one is suggesting you be forced into any arrangement. This is merely a matter of determining if there was improper interference in a business negotiation. A negotiation concerning my life. Her voice rose with emotion. If Mr. Stockton feels his pride was wounded, that's unfortunate. But using his influence to harass us legally is beneath contempt, Miller's expression soured. Young lady, your emotional outbursts do not change the legal questions at hand. And what exactly are those questions? Nicholas demanded. Specifically, the lawyer adjusted his spectacles. Whether Mr. Irving's sudden partnership with the Fairchilds was intended primarily to disrupt a prior understanding between Mr. Stockton and Mr. Fairchild, and whether compensation for such disruption is warranted. Compensation, Josephine's father echoed incredulously. Beyond the $3,000 already paid. For damages to reputation and business prospects, Miller clarified. Mr. Stockton estimates those damages at approximately $5,000. Nicholas laughed without humor. So that's it, a shakedown disguised as legal concern. Judge Wilson shifted uncomfortably. These are serious allegations from a respected citizen, Mr. Irving. They require proper investigation. Then investigate, Nicholas said firmly. You'll find our partnership agreement is legally sound and motivated by mutual business interest. Any other understanding Mr. Stockton believes he had was neither documented nor consensual on Miss Fairchild's part. The judge nodded slowly. A formal hearing will be scheduled next month. Until then, I suggest all parties refrain from further entanglements. That might complicate matters. His meaningful glance between Nicholas and Josephine made his implication clear. After the judge and lawyer departed, a heavy silence fell over the yard. Josephine's mother emerged from the house, her expression tight with worry. "What did they want?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. "Stockton's not finished with us," Josephine's father replied grimly. "He's using the law to continue his harassment." Nicholas's expression was thoughtful rather than defeated. He's overplayed his hand. Attempting to extract more money through legal intimidation won't sit well with the territorial authorities, regardless of his influence. Unless those authorities are already in his pocket, Josephine pointed out. Some may be, Nicholas acknowledged, but not all, and public opinion matters, especially with elections coming next year. Her father looked at him sharply. "What are you suggesting?" "That we fight this not just in court, but in the court of public opinion." Nicholas's eyes gleamed with determination. "Stockton wants to paint himself as the wronged party. We need to ensure people know the truth that he attempted to coerce a young woman into marriage to settle a debt." "The Montana Post has never been fond of Stockton's methods," her mother noted. "Their editor might be interested in such a story." Josephine felt a flutter of hope, but also apprehension. "Won't this just antagonize him further?" "Possibly," Nicholas conceded. "But men like Stockton rely on fear and silence to maintain their power. Breaking that silence might be our strongest defense." As twilight settled over the ranch that evening, Josephine found Nicholas alone by the corral, his expression distant as he gazed toward the mountains. The air between them had changed since the afternoon by the stream, not cooled, exactly, but weighted with new complications. "Are you regretting your involvement with our family yet?" she asked softly, coming to stand beside him. He turned to her with a gentle smile that eased some of her worry. "Not for a moment. Even with Stockton using his influence against you, this can't be what you envisioned when you came to Montana." "No," he agreed. "It's better." The unexpected response made her blink in surprise. "Better? How can legal troubles and threats be better?" Nicholas's expression grew serious. "Because they brought me to you." He took her hand carefully, as if giving her every opportunity to pull away. "Josephine, I meant what I said earlier. Whatever Stockton tries, whatever complications arise, my feelings haven't changed." Relief washed through her. "I was afraid you might reconsider, given the judge's warning about entanglements. That was Stockton speaking through Wilson, trying to separate us." His thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "I won't let him dictate our choices." "Nor will I," she said with newfound resolve. "If we must fight, then we fight together." The weeks leading up to the hearing were filled with both tension and unexpected allies. True to their plan, Nicholas and Josephine's father approached the Montana Post, which published a carefully worded article about certain influential cattlemen using debt to secure advantageous marriages with young women. Without naming Stockton directly, the implications were clear to anyone familiar with the territory's power players. Other ranchers who had experienced Stockton's heavy-handed business tactics began to speak out as well. What had begun as one family's struggle against an unwanted marriage arrangement evolved into a broader challenge to Stockton's outsized influence in the region. Through it all, Nicholas and Josephine grew closer, their courtship conducted in full view of the community despite Stockton's obvious displeasure. They attended church together, danced at the harvest social, and were often seen riding side by side along the boundaries of their combined ranching operation. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold, with the first dusting of snow on the distant peaks. The Helena courthouse was unusually crowded, filled not just with the usual legal observers, but also with ranchers, shopkeepers, and townspeople curious about the confrontation between Stockton and the Fairchild-Irving alliance. Josephine sat between her parents in the front row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to hide their trembling. Nicholas sat beside his lawyer, a young but sharp-witted man named Caldwell who had established a reputation for challenging the old guard of Montana's legal establishment. When Ebenezer Stockton entered, flanked by Miller and two other lawyers, a hush fell over the room. He looked neither left nor right, taking his seat with the rigid posture of a man accustomed to command. Judge Wilson, clearly uncomfortable with the public interest in what should have been a routine civil matter, called the hearing to order with a sharp rap of his gavel. "We are here to examine allegations of contractual interference brought by Mr. Ebenezer Stockton against Mr. Nicholas Irving," he announced. "Mr. Miller, you may present your client's case." What followed was a masterclass in legal misdirection. Miller portrayed Stockton as a respected businessman who had offered generous terms to help a struggling neighbor, only to have an outsider, Nicholas, deliberately undermine a settled arrangement for his own benefit. Mr. Stockton had a reasonable expectation that his debt forgiveness would be met with the agreed-upon consideration, Miller concluded smoothly. Mr. Irving's sudden appearance with exactly the required sum, immediately followed by a business partnership with Mr. Fairchild, suggests deliberate interference with malicious intent. When it was Caldwell's turn, he approached the matter differently. "Your Honor, my colleagues have presented an interesting narrative, but one that conveniently omits the most critical element of this case." He gestured toward Josephine. "Miss Fairchild herself a person, not property to be exchanged for debt forgiveness." Miller rose to object. "Miss Fairchild's personal preferences are immaterial to the contractual matter at hand." "On the contrary," Caldwell countered, "they are entirely material when one party attempts to include a human being as part of a business transaction without her consent." Judge Wilson frowned. "Mr. Caldwell, while I appreciate your concern for Miss Fairchild's situation, we are here to determine if Mr. Irving improperly interfered with a business arrangement." "The nature of that arrangement is precisely what's at issue, Your Honor," Caldwell insisted. "If Mr. Stockton's arrangement included compelling a young woman to marry him against her will, then it was not a legitimate contract that Mr. Irving could have interfered with." The debate continued for hours, with witnesses called to testify about the nature of the agreement between Stockton and Fairchild. Throughout the proceedings, Josephine noticed how Stockton's confidence seemed to waver as public sentiment in the courtroom clearly shifted against him. When it was finally Nicholas's turn to testify, he spoke with a clarity and conviction that silenced even the restless observers in the back rows. "I came to Montana Territory seeking opportunity like many men," he explained. "When I discovered the Fairchild Ranch had excellent water rights but was struggling financially, I saw a chance for a mutually beneficial partnership. That the timing coincided with Mr. Stockton's attempt to secure Miss Fairchild's hand in marriage was fortunate for her, but incidental to my business decision." Miller's cross-examination was aggressive. "You expect this court to believe it was mere coincidence that you appeared with exactly $3,000 at precisely the moment it would prevent Miss Fairchild's marriage to Mr. Stockton?" Nicholas's gaze never wavered. "I expect this court to recognize that a business partnership based on sound ranching principles is more believable than a man twice a young woman's age attempting to leverage financial distress into matrimony." A murmur of approval rippled through the courtroom, quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. The final witness was Josephine herself, called by Caldwell despite Miller's strenuous objections. As she took the stand, her heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "Miss Fairchild," Caldwell began gently, "did you at any point agree to marry Mr. Stockton?" "No, sir. I was informed of the arrangement after it had been decided between Mr. Stockton and my father." "And your feelings about this arrangement?" Josephine glanced briefly at Stockton's stony face before answering truthfully. "I was devastated. I respected Mr. Stockton as a businessman but had no desire to become his wife. The idea of marrying a man I did not love simply to erase a debt felt dehumanizing." Miller rose again. "Objection. Miss Fairchild's romantic notions are irrelevant." "Overruled," Judge Wilson said, surprising everyone. "The witness may continue." Encouraged, Josephine spoke more confidently. "When Mr. Irving offered a business partnership that would allow our family to repay the debt legitimately, it wasn't just financial salvation. It was the chance to make my own choices about my future choices every person deserves. After her testimony and final arguments from both lawyers, Judge Wilson called a brief recess to consider his ruling. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as people speculated on the outcome. Nicholas made his way to where Josephine sat with her parents. "You were magnificent," he whispered, taking the seat beside her. "No matter what happens, remember that." She slipped her hand into his, past caring who might observe the gesture. "As were you." When Judge Wilson returned, the courtroom fell silent. He cleared his throat, looking distinctly uncomfortable. "This case presents unusual circumstances," he began. "On one hand, we have established legal precedents regarding contractual interference. On the other, we have significant questions about the nature and enforceability of the original arrangement." He shuffled papers before continuing. "After careful consideration of the evidence and testimony presented, I find that no actionable interference occurred. Mr. Irving's business partnership with Mr. Fairchild appears legitimately motivated and properly executed. More importantly, any understanding regarding Miss Fairchild's marital future was neither documented nor consented to by the young woman herself, rendering it unenforceable as a matter of both law and basic human decency." A collective gasp, followed by murmurs of approval, swept through the room. Josephine squeezed Nicholas's hand tightly, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Furthermore," the judge continued, his voice strengthening, "I find Mr. Stockton's attempt to use this court to extract additional payment after accepting full settlement of the original debt to be vexatious and improper. This case is dismissed with prejudice, and Mr. Stockton is ordered to pay court costs for all parties." The courtroom erupted in conversation as Judge Wilson banged his gavel and made a hasty exit. Stockton rose stiffly, ignoring Miller's attempts to speak with him, and strode from the room without acknowledging anyone. Nicholas turned to Josephine, his eyes bright with emotion. "It's over, truly over." Her father clapped Nicholas on the shoulder, relief evident in every line of his face. "You stood by us when it counted, Irving. That's something neither I nor my family will forget." Outside the courthouse, well-wishers surrounded them, offering congratulations and support. Several other ranchers approached Nicholas to discuss potential business arrangements, impressed by his stand against Stockton's intimidation tactics. As the excitement gradually subsided and people dispersed, Nicholas drew Josephine aside, leading her to a quiet corner of the courthouse garden. "There's something I've been waiting to do," he said softly, "something I didn't want clouded by Stockton's threats or legal complications." Josephine's heart raced as he took both her hands in his. "What's that?" "Ask you a question that has nothing to do with business partnerships or legal hearings." His smile was both nervous and hopeful. "Josephine Fairchild, these past months have shown me what kind of woman you are: brave, intelligent, and true to your convictions. I know our acquaintance has been unusual from the start, but my feelings for you are the most certain thing I've ever known." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing a small gold ring with a modest diamond that caught the afternoon sunlight. "I'm asking for the privilege of spending my life with you, not because of any arrangement or obligation, but because I love you." Tears of joy welled in Josephine's eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Nicholas." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she added with a smile, "Though I hope you realize you're getting a business partner as well as a wife. I've learned quite a bit about cattle ranching these past months." His laugh was warm and genuine. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Their wedding the following spring was a community celebration, attended by ranchers, townspeople, and even Judge Wilson, who had developed a surprising backbone in legal matters since the Stockton hearing. Ebenezer Stockton himself was notably absent, having turned his attention to business interests farther north in the territory. The Fairchild-Irving Ranch flourished under their combined management, with Josephine proving herself as capable in business matters as Nicholas had always believed. Her father, freed from the crushing weight of debt, found renewed passion for the breeding program he'd once been famous for. On their first anniversary, As they sat on the porch of the home they had built halfway between the original Fairchild homestead and Nicholas's property, Josephine reflected on how completely her life had transformed in just over a year. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked, leaning against Nicholas's shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. "Sometimes," he admitted, his arm tightening around her. "If I'd arrived a week later or chosen a different territory altogether. Or if you hadn't stopped that day when you saw me crying by the fence line." Nicholas turned to look at her, the love in his eyes as clear and unwavering as it had been from the moment he'd first told her she deserved kindness. "That was never a possibility. Even before I knew why you were upset, something told me I needed to speak with you, that you were important." She touched his face gently. "Important enough to risk everything against Stockton. Worth everything," he corrected, "then and now." As twilight deepened into night and the first stars appeared over the Montana wilderness they both called home, Josephine knew with absolute certainty that she had found not just freedom from an unwanted fate, but a love built on respect, partnership, and the simple truth Nicholas had recognized from the beginning, that every person deserves kindness and the chance to choose their own happiness. Years later, when their children asked how they had met, Josephine would tell the story of a desperate arrangement, a determined cowboy, and the words that had changed her life. "You deserve kindness instead." In the telling, their legacy of love would continue, as enduring as the mountains that witnessed their beginning and as boundless as the western sky that stretched above the life they had built together.